Hello, and thank you for joining me here today on this restoration journey that's laying ahead of us, and my first subscriber giveaway, but more on that later, of this very interesting military watch from the 1930s presumably, which is in pretty rough shape. Whatever material this is, it has disintegrated over time, and there's a hole in the case, just next to the crown. Here I'm using the box cutter knife to remove the straps. The leather is already falling apart, as you can see. And now trying to open the case back carefully without breaking anything. And to be honest, the movement looks like it's in dire need of a service. It was not running when I got it, and we'll have to figure out what is wrong with it and how to fix it. And you can see there's rust on this hairspring regulator here. It also seems that this watch is wound up completely, and once I try to wind it a bit more, it wanted to start running a bit but then stops again. Now I'm trying to carefully release the power that's inside of the watch in the mainspring, and you can already see that it releases the power very stubbornly, and it is taking me quite some time to release the power here. Usually this should be done within a couple of seconds, but in this case I thought a couple of times, okay, I'm done now, but then it still kept going, as you can clearly see here. So a lot of dried oil and gunk that restricts the power from being released. Now I'm checking if I can set the hands, and it's actually working. But as you can already see, there's no crystal, no glass on top to cover the hands. Also the hands are missing the loom. It is definitely a pretty interesting condition that this watch is left in. And here you see the case back with the serial number. There are also some marks of previous watchmakers. And here you can see the hole that is in the case back. It's not easy to tell what kind of material this is made of. My first guess was brass, nickel plated, because of the brownish bronze color that was shining through. But it rather seems to be some different alloy, maybe in the direction of iron or lead even. So now firstly I need to get the movement out of the casing, and therefore we have these two case screws that are holding it in, also rusty. Then I need to remove the bezel, which is done here, which should free up the movement so I can push it out of the casing. But before we can dive into the movement and its servicing, we still have to remove the dial. There's also this movement ring, pretty thin metal, that is covering up the side. I don't know, it's maybe functioning as a kind of dust cover. And then two tiny dial screws that are holding this beautiful, in my opinion, beautiful enamel dial. I'm trying to lift it up very carefully. As you can see, it already has some cracks in it. And this is a sound that I don't like to hear, because it seems we have a glued on dial again. This means also the dial feet, yep, they are cut off. So this is another thing that we'll need to address. I'll definitely not glue it back on, but this is something to worry about when the watch is running. Here I'm removing the hour wheel and checking out the balance. Really hoping that it's alright, that the balance stuff is not broken, because there's no shock protection on this balance setting, as you can see. I'm lifting it out. I'm gonna inspect it. But I'm quite relieved to see that the hairspring looks really good, besides maybe a bit of rust, and the balance staff seems to be intact. which leads to the fact that the problem with this watch will lay a little bit deeper within this movement. Here I'm plying off the pallet fork bridge. Checking the pivots of the pallet fork, but they seem to be fine. Now I'm taking my attention to the barrel bridge. The screw of the crown wheel obviously reverse threaded, so to loosen it you have to turn right. Now the ratchet wheel can be lifted off, the crown wheel, and so far I didn't see anything wrong with this movement. Now the barrel bridge can be lifted off, and there is obviously some dried up oil and grease discoloration. And here the click is removed, and also the click spring. So next up is the train wheel bridge. Same long screws, carefully plying it off, and seems to be stuck on the center wheel. And also the third wheel seems to be stuck in the bridge, which definitely shows the need of a service, meaning that there's dried up oil in the pivot points, in the jewels. But besides that, all the wheels seems to be fine. But here, now we're getting closer to our problem, since the barrel seems to be stuck in the main plate. Here's some parts that fell out before the setting lever fell out from the bottom. I'm removing the can pinion to free up the center wheel on the other side. And there it fell down. Here it is. Looks fine as well. Dirty but fine. And now, since we're already here, I can also just make quick progress with the keyless works. Here, the setting lever spring. And now trying to remove the yoke, but obviously not the best way. So here's the yoke and sliding pinion, winding pinion also getting freed up. That's the minute wheel and the intermediate wheel. And this is how the bottom jewel underneath the balance looks like. Also not including a shock setting. But now we're getting closer to the real problem here. As you can see, the barrel is completely stuck. And I'm using some brass tweezers here, not to damage anything, but I can't even push it out. By using force, it turns a bit. But then in the end, I was able to push it out. So we'll have to see if I have to open up this hole a bit or if it's really just because of the dirt. So here you can already see me in the process of pre-cleaning the movement, which is absolutely needed. Here you get a clean shot of the caliber, by the way, which is a 26.5 T3 from Omega. And here back to cleaning the jewels. How I'm gonna remove the glue is another problem. I used some pegwood that I sharpened to push off the glue after I softened it with some isopropanol. In the end, I got it all off. And now I'm inspecting the jewels. They don't seem to be cracked, which is really positive. You see some cool rainbow coloring effect here on the main plate. So after making sure all the jewels are okay, I can finish the pre-cleaning and set my eyes to the barrel, which I'm opening here. I instantly thought that the mainspring will be broken because the barrel arbor came loose so easily, but it seems to be fine. After closer inspection, it maybe just was a bit loose around the barrel arbor. It's a blued mainspring. And definitely one of the older ones, judging by its shape, which is wound up as a complete circle and not like in the new ones in an S shape. It looks quite old, but seems to be fine. So I'm going to reuse it and see how it performs. But before that, I'm going to take a closer look at the balance. And having a look under the microscope, you can clearly see that rust started to build up, especially on the hairspring regulator. But firstly, I'm screwing it down to see if it spins. And now I'm taking off the cap jewel, which includes taking off these two extremely tiny screws. And there we have it. Now I can carefully lift off the regulator. Seeing underneath, it looks quite fine. And here we have it. Now I will try to get rid of the rust as good as I can using some 5000 grit sandpaper sticks. And also the two tiny pinions that are holding the hairspring later can obviously not be filed or put pressure on. So I need to lay it just on the edge of my sandpaper stick and holding it with some Rodico, working the edges, finishing up with a glass fiber pen. But also have a look at the case screws here. They're pretty rusted, so I put them in a pin vise and gave them the sandpaper treatment as well, also from the sides and in the middle, in order to be allowed to go to the cleaning machine. And while all the parts are getting sorted into the cleaning baskets and then entering the cleaning machine, I can maybe use the time and talk a bit about the mentioned giveaway. So once I'm reaching 1000 subscribers on this channel, I would like to give the watch in this video away to one of my subscribers. And to enter the giveaway, you don't have to do anything besides being a subscriber of this channel and leaving a comment on this video. Once I'm reaching 1000 subscribers, I will also post a short video of how the winner was chosen, or maybe I will integrate it in my next watch restoration video. But you will definitely be informed. One more important thing to mention is that at no point of this giveaway I will ask you for any money for shipping or whatsoever. So if you get any messages concerning that, please ignore them and don't send out any money. That being said, I wish you good luck, and here we can have a look at the parts fresh out of the cleaning machine. And we'll get on with the assembly of the watch. So now that the parts got a proper cleaning, we can continue with the assembly of this watch. Here, putting back the regulator arm of the hairspring and a nice little drop of oil in the middle of the cap jewel, setting it down and trying to get it back into position. Those two screws are really tiny. Also, they had a bit of rust on them, which I tried to remove as good as I could. Screwing it down and having a look from the side. Definitely looking much better than before. Also, most of the rust is gone. And here, same drop of oil on the bottom cap jewel. As I said, no real shock setting, no Inca block. This is before the time that was invented. Giving a burst of air to the balance which seems to oscillate nicely, not coming to a stop quickly, which is exactly what we wanted to see. And here we are back to the mainspring already, having my winder set ready, maneuvering the spring onto it, and now I can carefully place the lid on top and wind the spring back into a temporary chamber from which it's then transferred back into the barrel. The last bit always is tricky, letting go of some tension. And there you saw the last bit went in. Also placing a few drops of oil in the barrel to lubricate the mainspring and pushing it back into the barrel. Fitting the barrel arbor. Looks quite nice and tight. Another drop of oil on top. And then we can close up the barrel and hope that it will fit a bit better now without getting stuck. This tool here, perfect to close the barrel. Also lubricating the hole where the barrel meets the main plate. And the barrel bridge, securing it down onto the movement. What is definitely interesting to mention, as I'm now here just continuing to assemble the barrel bridge, is that the serial numbers of movement and case are not quite matching. The movement has a serial number between 9 million and 10 million, which results in a production year of 1931, so the beginning of the Second World War. The case on the other side has a serial number in the mid 7 millions, which results in a production year of 1930, or a bit higher. That means that basically all the components are still made in the 1930s, but in my opinion it's unlikely that the watch was released originally with this case and movement together. For me it's more probable that at some point the movement got exchanged, probably was broken, something needed to be fixed, and instead of changing a part, the whole movement was exchanged. At least that's my thought on it. I'm also not 100% sure about the dial. I got the watch in this condition and it's definitely genuine. There's no question about that. But I'm still always asking myself how all the parts come together and what's the history of this watch. That's why I definitely wanted to mention what I thought about the serial numbers being almost 2 million apart. Anyway, why are we saying that? The train of wheels already came together, and now the click is being assembled again. Always testing the function of the spring and giving a bit of HP 1300 to the contact points where metal works against metal. Here now fitting the ratchet wheel, getting it into place, the crown wheel with its reverse threaded screw. Now advancing to the keyless works. Sliding pinion and winding pinion getting put into place. Always a bit of grease to all the contact points. The yoke sitting down nicely and waiting for its spring. Here it is. Trying to carefully bring it under tension. The setting lever also gets greased up and offered to the movement. Here the setting lever spring with its two pretty small screws. But all in all, the movement looks so much better after cleaning already. The cleaning machine is definitely a game changer. Here now, bringing the setting lever under tension and finally screwing it down. I always leave a little bit of wiggle room. Setting lever screw comes from the other side. And probably some of you already noticed, I forgot something. The easier the movements, the less concentrated. And yeah, the setting lever spring of course covers intermediate wheel, the minute wheel here, and also I installed the Ken pinion already, as you saw. And now I can reinstall the setting lever spring. I mean, mistakes happen to everyone. And now I have the satisfaction 2 times to bring the setting lever spring under tension. Changing positions and adding grease. Now oiling all the jewels with 9010 and some HP 1300 to the center wheel, which brings us pretty close to finalizing this assembly by adding the pellet fork. Very carefully. Pellet fork bridge already sitting down fine. Slowly moving to ensure everything is in position before screwing it down. And having a look at the left hand screw, I think I'm not quite happy with that. So I took it back out and tried to polish it a bit. Still not 100% perfect, but definitely less rusty, less corroded. And now I can put a bit of wine to the watch. And I'm quite relieved to see that the pellet fork is jumping from one side to the other, meaning that the power of the mainspring can be transferred through the movement towards the balance. Now I'm adding a little bit more wine to the watch before offering the balance. Carefully sitting it down. And it's a very tense moment. Not quite sure if it's gonna run yet. But there it kicks back to life. And not yet running super good. But I haven't screwed it down yet. But now I can already see that the amplitude is building up. And we have a running watch, which is already the first task of this restoration done. And that means we can set our eyes onto the next target, the dial. So if you're wondering what I'm doing here, I'm actually not completely crazy. What I'm using here are denture cleaning tablets, also for braces, that are cleaning out the dirt that is sitting in the cracks of the enamel, making them almost invisible. And I think the results are definitely speaking for themselves. But now we're obviously standing in front of the next problem, and that is how we're gonna place the dial on the movement. For that, I got these brass dial feet, here with a diameter of 1.04 millimeter. But first I gotta test if they're actually the right size. So I'm screwing in the dial screw and placing the dial feet in its hole, tightening it down. And it's holding in there pretty good, but it's obviously a bit too long, so we have to do something about that. So I'm trying to shorten them with my Dremel tool and placing them back into the movement, and that already looks much better. After a couple of minutes of adjusting, they're sitting nice and flat. Now this is my technique of doing this. I'm using a bit of glue on the dial feet. Before I also experimented with placing them on the dial already, but this way it seems way nicer. Now I have to just align the dial perfectly, which with a small second is quite easy. Pressing it down when it's perfectly aligned. And now when I'm lifting up the dial, the feet should be at the perfect position to be working together with the movement. And they're quite sturdy, and I think this is the best method of gluing new dial feet to a dial with perfect alignment. Now screwing it down, I have to say I'm quite happy with the result. I would never glue a dial to the movement, also in respect to the next watchmaker. But here we are already one step further, concerning ourselves with the hands. They also look quite dirty. The loom was gone, as I said before, but they also rusted. They were blued originally, so I'm using my fiber brush to get rid of the rust, cleaning the rest off with the wood as good as I can, before giving them a small polish. And what you see here is me mixing the loom, and since I got this as a comment on another video, it was actually of the Jaeger-LeCoultre watch, I got a comment that adding coffee powder to the loom could make it look more accurate to the age of the watch. And that's what I'm trying here now. So I got a bit of coffee powder, and I'm gonna add this into my loom mixture. And as you can see, it's getting this yellowish brownish color. And now I'm gonna suspend this onto the hands, and I'm gonna see how the result is looking in the end. I'm aiming for an aged loom look on these hands, since the watch is almost a century old. But yeah, it's the first time, and I thought I'll just definitely try it out. In my opinion, it actually looks quite nice. Here the hour hand, having these little coffee spots in there, definitely looks old, I would say. Those are the original hands, by the way, that's for sure. And with this new loom, I'm actually quite happily surprised. I don't know, what's your opinion? Maybe you can leave me a comment if you would prefer just a clean, green, fresh loom, or if you say that coffee powder is definitely the way to go here. And yeah, the watch is running. Speeding it up here a bit. And I would say the first part of the restoration is successful. But there's still a lot to do. As you could see in the beginning, the case is in pretty rough shape. And here I'm showing you some shots of my countless hours of polishing and also soldering. So I filled the hole up that was in the case. Now slowly grinding it down, progressing with finer and finer grit, also setting my attention to the lux. And the more time goes by, the more the case looks actually like a case again. All the imperfections are getting grinded out, so that I can finally move over to the polishing machine, which is definitely needed for what I want to do next, because I decided to nickel plate this case to protect it against what happened to it before, mainly corrosion. But for that, it has to be absolutely clean. So the first step here is to clean off all the debris, all the fats with an electro cleaner. This happens by using a solid steel anode and the watch case performing as a cathode, which will, by adding voltage and current, leave the case completely clean. Next up, I have to rinse it in distilled water before moving over to the next step, where a nickel plate is performing as anode, which by adding voltage is slowly dissolving into the electrolyte solution, which is enriched with Ni2+ ions, and thus building up a thin layer of nickel onto the cathode, which in this case is the case. This, by the way, was a good friend of mine that also happens to have a YouTube channel, and the name is actually pretty similar to mine. His channel is called the German Spearfishing Channel, concerning with spearfishing and fishing, also a great hobby of mine. I thankfully didn't follow his advice to give kip and add 10 amperes, but nevertheless, he was a great help to me filming this, and also it's always more fun to do something like that together, especially if you do it for the first time. And what you see here already is the second part of the casing, the bottom plate, the back cover, and for that I needed to build a special construction, some kind of grill where the case back was placed on. So after the electro cleaning process there was a rinse, and now following up again with a nickel plating process, which on the silver case you will not be able to see. But if you look closely in this sped up video, you can see how my little grill is turning silver. And now we can finally have a look at the result. And I think it turned out quite good. We definitely can see that a layer of nickel was building up. So there's only one thing left to do, as I intended to perform a brush finish on the case back. That's what you can see here. But now back to the movement. You can see it's still running nicely. Adding the case ring, removing the crown before the movement can finally be put back into the case. Listening to some music here in the background. I hope I don't get a copyright strike, but I highly doubt it. But again, there was one more task left, and that is adding a new glass, new crystal. So I decided for a very flat domed acrylic crystal, using my crystal press, fitting it in there. And even though there's some hair and dust, it looks quite nice. Getting rid of the dust. And a very satisfying click. Now the stem can find its way back into the movement. Securing everything with the case screws. A little stubborn. And now finally adding the case back. Let's hope we get another satisfying click. Oh yeah. That was quite good. And here we have it. The finished product. Definitely looks much better than before. Still visible where the hole once was, but I mean, I couldn't laser weld it. This is not a watch you go swimming with, and it's definitely a wearable condition now. Still adding a new leather strap. Could also be probably worn with a NATO strap, but I decided for this one, since I think it's looking pretty classy. Also can be worn as a dress watch now. And now we just have to have a look how the watch is running. So I put it on the Timegrapher, and we got some good news and some bad news. So the watch is running pretty accurately, but we have a beat error of 8.8, and this is not acceptable, to be honest. Which means that I have to take the watch back apart and have a look what is wrong. And you can see that the impulse jewel of the balance is resting too far to the right. So the pallet fork should be, without any wind in the watch, resting in the middle between the two posts. Which means that I have to make small adjustments to the collar where the hairspring is attached to. And you can see that I'm making moves in the right direction. It's sitting already far more to the middle, but I need to go a bit further. And here you can see that's already much more to the center, at least by eye, which means that I can put some wind to the watch and see how it's running on the Timegrapher. And the watch is running again, which is good. And now I want to give it as close to a full wind as possible, so I can also have a feeling how the amplitude is building up. And it looks to be running quite good. Nice amplitude, but only the Timegrapher will show. And that is definitely as good as it gets for me. Everything below 1 millisecond of beat error is very fine. With the old mainspring, a strong amplitude of 230. Also considering it's a 90-year-old watch. Me, for my part, I'm pretty happy with the restoration. It was another good journey, where I also could learn a lot about nickel plating. And I wish whoever wins the giveaway in the end a lot of fun with this magnificent timepiece. See you in the next one.